Hey, 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 it's Sarah Jane, and I'm so excited that you are joining me to explore in vulnerability and compassion and patience what it means to have safe, healthy boundaries and stop codependent, addictive people pleasing, so that we can really set you up for success by honoring your sovereignty, to know that your needs are important, and getting you to a place where, if you stay till the end, I'll be sharing my deal and deliver formula on how you can really start to return to trust and love yourself. Hi, Carol. Nice to see ya. So I've put a question while we're just waiting for people to come in. And my question is, do you have fears around establishing healthy boundaries? Because I know for me, growing up in Zimbabwe with a father that was an abusive, narcissistic, alcoholic, third generation, that we learn our boundaries. We do what we know, and we learn very early on from those first early years, pre-7-year-old, how to create safety for ourselves. Hi, Linda. We're talking about boundaries today. So if you can relate to what I'm speaking about on how to, firstly, gain awareness of your patterns, cautions. Yeah. Hi, Alexandra. So how do you start to have a healthy relationship with your boundaries? Well, in my early days, I learned very early on that in order to create safety, because I was, so sensitive, and I felt everybody else's thoughts, feelings, and emotions, that the only way to create safety or to avoid conflict was to create coping patterns, where later on I became trapped in this sort of people pleasing, being everybody's doormat, not being able to say no. So if you can relate to any of that, give me a yes in the comments. Because, the way that we establish boundaries, for me, is poor boundaries is that place where we're very reactive to other people's thoughts, feelings, and emotions. So sometimes we become very defensive because we're absorbing other people's beliefs and attitudes. And I want you to know that none of that is your business. Okay. In order for us to have intact boundaries, which basically just means that we allow a person to have very clear limits and boundaries, and we give that other person the ability to be vulnerable and at the same time be protected, because we're approachable and asking the same in return. So if you have non-existent internal boundaries, does it make sense that you're not able to know your limits? This is saying to your child, don't eat before dinner, and don't ask for snacks after dinner. And they find a way to manipulate you. Children are really good at pushing our boundaries, because that's the way that they learn how to create secure attachment for themselves. So if we didn't have that from our primary caregivers, we learn to go into ambivalence or avoidance or other ways of being, in order to keep ourselves safe, because the environment that we are in was not safe for us. So if you're one of those people like me that had very, very, in fact, non-existent internal boundaries, I didn't know what my limits were. So it becomes, we don't know when to say no in inappropriate situations that can be dangerous, not just for our health and safety, but for our mental well-being and our emotional well-being as well. So if you can sort of relate to that, that it's exhausting to constantly overexert ourselves without having the awareness of the consequences. There's a difficulty perhaps in budgeting time or money or energy. And I see this show up in a lot of codependent relationships too, where somebody owes you money, or perhaps you've lent somebody money, or you delivered something in return for something that someone promised to give you, and they don't deliver, and you have a really hard time asking for the money. And I see this a lot, especially with highly sensitive empaths that are in the caring industry. A lot of codependents end up being in service to others. They're caregivers. My mother did that for a while in England, where she was a caregiver for the elderly people. And she had to put up with all sorts of abuse because she did not have clear defined boundaries. So, we don't ever feel heard. And if we don't feel heard, the lines get very blurry, right? Because we're not functioning from a place of trusting that we're worthy of being heard in the first place. So, either we're stating very clearly what we want, and the other person doesn't hear us. So, if I say, for example, I'm really setting a new intention to get to bed by 10 o'clock, and my partner comes into the bedroom and he puts the television on because he wants to watch the soccer. And if I'm not able to trust that my intention and my needs need to be met, I wouldn't be able to tell him to go watch television in the other room. I'd give up that space and end up tossing and turning until he turned the television off. So, this is again where I see a lot of codependency show up, where we're constantly making excuses to put things off. So, perhaps you've been asking for a raise, or you've been asking to have a meeting with your boss because you want to discuss your long-term future with the company, and you keep putting it off. You keep waiting for a better time because, you want to get him in the right mood, and he's never in the right mood. So oftentimes in relationships, I've seen this as well, and I've experienced that myself, where it's over, right? We know that we've left the relationship years before we actually get to the point, but we're too afraid to leave because we're afraid of the consequences of that. So we constantly wait, and sometimes we wait years longer than we should do because there's never a right time. So if you can relate to that, let me know. And I'm just trying to see how to make this work. So how will establishing healthy boundaries improve your quality of life? If you can relate to this, let me know, and post your insights into, what is it costing you to be in that space of constantly waiting for things to be right before you actually ask for what you want? And what is it costing the other people that you care about, your loved ones in your life, because you do not have the courage or the clarity to honor your yes and honor your no? So let me know in the comments if if you have fears about that. What are your fears in asking for what you want? What are you afraid of? Most of the time we're afraid of the punishment. We're never looking for the reward because it's part of our primal nature to move toward pleasure and away from pain. So as children, we learn very early on not to rock the boat, not to be needy, not to be asking for what we need to create safety in our lives for fear of abandonment and rejection, because that's what it comes down to. And I see this a lot with people who have partial internal boundaries, that they'll go between no limits and boundaries to having boundaries, right? So it's the all or nothing scenario, where it's like, I have nothing to hide, nothing to prove, as a mantra. Because oftentimes we'll put up a boundary that's so strong and rigid, which is why I said we're kind people. We need flexible boundaries that we're able to still honor our stake and not have to pendulate between all or nothing. I used to see my sister do this a lot with her kids. She'd say, this is it. And the next day she wouldn't show up and do what she said. And this is part of braving the wilderness that Dr. Brené Brown talks about, that we have to be willing to be trustworthy. We have to trust ourselves enough for other people to know that we are trustworthy. And we see this in animals. If we're not willing to take the lead and create safety for our animals when we're out walking with them, they will pull and tug on the lead because they don't feel safe that you're not showing up in that leadership position. So how you do anything is how you do everything. And if you're sort of pendulating, it's very confusing if you're on the receiving end of that. And I see this a lot in relationships with codependents and narcissists. They blur the boundaries. They're constantly shifting the goalposts so that you actually think you're going insane. And we're living in insane times right now. You know, what better time to come to you and offer you this conversation than under the full moon in Scorpio, which is really calling us into a place of letting the old stories die, of returning to source in a way that we can transcend, because we are aware of our patterns and we're understanding of our needs and wants and desires. And that's the space where we get to create from love, and trust is the foundation of all things. This is where we get to unravel the delusion and the illusion of all the lies we've been trying to make true in order to keep ourselves safe enough to return to trust. So, I'm coming here to you today in a place of asking you, are you ready to align to the feminine? Are you ready to let the past die, to have the death of the old story, and know that you get to create your own safety, that you are your most valuable asset? You will find renewal when you start to release the shadows of the subconscious and bring them into the light, which is again another reason why we have to own and acknowledge what we're afraid of, especially when it comes to establishing boundaries, if we're going to create permanent change in our life, and also more change towards the world concerns that we really care about. You can't trust your own intuition and follow your own truth about what motivates and moves you toward what you really care about and showing up and doing the work if you do not have healthy, flexible boundaries. So if this is making sense, give me a yes. Give me a yes. And let me know how will establishing healthy, flexible boundaries improve your quality of life? Just post that in the comments below. And if you're listening to this on the replay, I do go back and listen to all of them and answer you as best as I can. So while you're typing that in, I want to ask you another question. And that is, when was the last time that you felt powerless with your boundaries? Or you didn't even know how to create safe boundaries for yourself? And while you're typing that in, I want to just, ask you again, is if you're finding that it's hard to ask for what you want, where you're waiting for a better time and that better time never comes, if you're making excuses to stay in relationships or be treated like somebody else's doormat because you're afraid of the consequences of asking for what you want and being able to say no in a kind way that creates a win-win for you or somebody else. If you might be maybe really needing this, right? Because you're aligned to your vibrational frequency of being you in every experience. All the challenges, all the hardships, all the lessons that you've learned have come from love and are born out of love. And yet we are the first point of reference to give up our freedom to choose. And this is, very relevant as well because it's Freedom Day here in South Africa. But if you can't ask for what you want, you're never going to set yourself free to live fully, to take off all the masks, all the false senses of identities and show up real and raw and vulnerable. So, what is the next step that you need in identifying where that thought, feeling, attitude, or belief came from, where you have decided that you cannot honor your word, that you cannot do what you say and say what you do as part of your boundary boot camp? Because when you learn boundaries from your parents, watching them as you grew up, you start to see the patterns when you ask them questions. So if you have a notebook, I suggest you write some of these questions down and come back to them and let me know what showed up for you. because we learn through what our primary caregivers did. So was your mother able to express herself? Or did she sort of, like my mother, I think there was a little learned helplessness there. And I also think she realized that or she formed the belief that my father didn't care, which became a very self-fulfilling prophecy of non-caring, and also a place where, oftentimes, if we are not asking to get our needs met, we lose respect for ourselves, and then other people lose respect for us. I know I was in that place with my mother. When I saw how badly my father was treating her, and she still stayed because there was never a right time, and she became very distrustful, and like all of us, we end up closing our hearts, and that leads to depression and anxiety and hopelessness, where we think we can't change or choose a different way of being in the world. So, did your mother apologize a lot? I remember I used to say sorry for everything, because that was what I'd learned from my mother in order for her to keep the peace from a very volatile, ugly drunk of my father when he came home. Was it easy for other people to take advantage of your mother? Was your father strong? Was he able to stand in your truth, or in his truth, or did he find it hard to express himself? Was it easy for others to take advantage of your father? Did they walk all over him? As children, we're so sensitive, and we pick up when things are out of alignment and out of congruence. So did your father apologize a lot? How did that dynamic in your family or cultural matrix affect you growing up, or your siblings, to ask for what they want? Or were you all people pleasers like my family, where nobody spoke their truth, and it wasn't okay to be into yourself enough? I always say, if you're not full of yourself, who are you supposed to be full of? Right? So my other question to you is what do you need to be aware of that are blind spots and pattern repeats that you keep going into because of how your family dynamic impacted you? And you're sitting here as a grown-up and needing to grow your child parts as an internal dynamic first, before you can actually start showing up and trust that your needs will be met in a way that's compassionate and kind and patient, and really knowing your no, knowing your yes. So what do you need right now to be aware of around your blind spots and patterns, or is this new to you, and are you starting to really use this opportunity to get really clear on your values? At this time where the full moon in Scorpio is telling us to trust our intuition, to let the old stories die. So how do you get clear on your boundaries if you find it very hard to express your needs? Who did you learn that from? Is a really good place to come from compassionate listening to your child parts, because none of this is your fault. It's just the bad training of this reality. Yeah. Linda says, big time, still learning to say no. Yeah. And this is why I call it the training days, because every day that we can honor our yes, know our no, Linda, it grows on itself. It's like the trust process. You never go back to the beginning. Every time we're looking at these 1 degree incremental shifts, we get stronger and more confident in our ask to get what we want, right? That is beyond abusive manipulation or codependency. Alexandra says, I also knew that one well. Yeah. So to set boundaries, does it make sense that we need to call on divine support? Because we are actually, in a way, co-creating our reality with our ancestors and what we learned from them, right? The family patterning, the ancestral inheritance that sometimes needs to be changed, and it stops with you. So, abuse continues until we say no too. So would you be willing to be that that braving, that courage, that love warrior for future generations that haven't been born yet as the ancestor of that. And to call on your ancestral helping spirits now, to call on your medicine guides, your animal totems to support you in this time of great change, where you can come back to the space of love and trust and create new, strong, healthy, flexible foundations that no matter what wind blows or what storm comes into your environment, you're rock solid, because you know your why, right? You can't know your why until you know who you are, until you trust who you are is exactly who you came here to be. So we need to feel confident. We need to feel clear. And in that, we build courage. Confidence isn't something outside of you. Confidence is something that you gain the more you lean into trust, into trusting that you are your most valuable asset, that you are worthy of an abundant, beautiful, loving life in all your relationships. So, we have to have the courage to say no when we mean no, because it says yes to something of value to us. So when we're rooted in our values, does it make sense that that's when we can start to discern what is a yes and what is a no? And there's a whole bunch of core values. So, find the ones that inspire you and then narrow it down, because that's going to become what your mantra for what you stand for, no matter what other people are doing. Remember, what other people think of you, especially in codependent and narcissistic relationships, is none of your business. Some of mine are trust, our truth, freedom, unity, the vision to see clearly into the future so that I can create it from being present now. So write down, what are some of your core values? What are the things that you really care about? And what do you take a stand for? I always say it has to be greater than your personal why, right? It has to be bigger than that, so that's what motivates and moves you on those days where you can't get out of bed for your own selfish why. And there's nothing wrong with being selfish. I always say, if you're not full of yourself, who are you supposed to be full of? And this is where, as codependents, if you've come from that sort of lineage or ancestral inheritance, as a way to keep yourself safe, don't make yourself wrong. Don't go into judgment. See it as the gift and know that you are strong and powerful enough to stand in the truth, to stand in the front of the line and release anything, cleanse, clear, and purify anything that's standing in your way. And this is right in your permission slip. Now, this is where we call in the warrior goddess, the true self, the you and your true nature, who knows like she knows. And this is where we go into rituality, right? Of protection, of joy, of dance, of music, of family. It's the bast for this ritual. And this is about drawing the line in the sand, right? With a chalk or a string or a finger. I want you to, see that, even if it's an imaginary line in your mind's view right now, to just stand in front of that line and release the past by repeating strong and powerful statements. And I'll give you a few so that you can write your permission slip. And I hope that you share some of your permission slip with us. I'm going to go deeper into this in the next sort of 28 days of true belonging, which is my annual gift to honor the sovereignty of you and me as the oneness and the contribution of seeing each other. But some of them could be, hand on heart, that I will no longer apologize for myself. I'm worthy of taking up the space that I occupy. And I'm going to expand that out 100 times more to reach people as the lighthouse that are also stumbling maybe in the dark. I will no longer be taken advantage of. So write out what you're no longer willing to stand for. Okay? And share those with me. And I want to know, what is your next step in identifying some of these boundaries? What is your Joan of Arc archetype asking of you now? that you will stand up for yourself, that you will express your boundaries with compassion and grace, that you will speak to yourself with loving, kind, patient, compassionate listening, that you will honor yourself and use discernment before accepting invitations to do more than you can take on. This is the too much on your plate syndrome of people pleasing. So create some more affirmations that feel appropriate to you and then apply them in the training days. This is the implementation. And without that, this is just more information. This is more of a dump. So put it into action in your life. And I ask you another question. Who are you struggling to set boundaries with? Do a brain dump. List all the names and what your issues are. And remember, issues are assigned. They're not yours. They were given to you, either down your ancestral or familial lines, or your cultural lines, or your inner saboteur's voice. So an example where you can do this dump. And, when I was up at 3 last night with the moon shining in, asking me to really bring up all this mucky, sensitive stuff to cleanse, clear, and purify. One of the things I wrote down was that I have a really hard time setting boundaries with my husband about who does what in the household. And he's one of those that does a lot of projection and assumption. He can't hear me. And it creates a lot of disharmony and also a lot of lack of respect because there's no space to move in there. So, owning that and looking like I did to say, I have a hard time saying no to projects that sound really fun, but are taking me away from my focus with my clients and with my support and with my child. And another one for me that came up was, my mother-in-law constantly shows up and tells me how to grow my child. And that really bothers me. So name it, see what the assign is, where it came from, and then look, like I asked in that first question to you, is what are the fears that you have around establishing healthy boundaries? So when you acknowledge it, that's the first step in actually starting to heal and set yourself free from constantly perpetuating these old patterns of abuse. So, I no longer have any point of view about how I'm growing my child and how she's growing me. And I can stand in my truth and actually say, what would you do if you were in my situation? What would love do? And then listening and then discarding what isn't relevant and taking what is and thanking the person for it either way. So, using this heart energy is a beautiful way for us to really deepen our discernment in looking at what we're choosing and creating. And if it is in alignment with our core values, with our deepest needs and desires and wants for better in our lives, better for our families, better for our communities, and better for the earth, right? Better for the animals. So feel into it. It's either a hell yes or a hell no. There's no middle ground. There's no maybe. And if you haven't, listened to my SoundCloud on reducing the big butts, right? Where we make ourselves heavy rather than lightening our load by honoring our boundaries. So with family and friends, where you feel like you're giving away your power, you're draining energy, where are the energy leaks? Look at where you stand in your values and set up conversations with them to create clear agreements and boundaries. And the first place is to first identify it. And then you can start to shift and change your perception of what's true and what's not true for you. And remember, what's true for you doesn't have to be true for somebody else. There's the truth, and then there's what's true for you. And if you don't know how to honor and listen to the innate intelligence of your body compass, go and look at my videos on how to use your body as a pendulum. Your body never lies. It's your greatest consciousness facilitator. And yet we have learned and been programmed to override that intuitive knowing by going into problem solving and head tripping as a way to avoid standing in our truth and having strong boundaries. So, look at what you need and then see how you can ask for what you want in a way. And I'll post the conversation template below. If you just PM me, I'll send it out to you, because it's a lovely big PDF on a lot of what we're talking about on boundaries and how to establish strong ones. And I'll also send you my deal and deliver, so that you have it to refer to over and over again as you start May the 1st or May Day or Freedom Day with a new opportunity to really honor yourself and be sovereign to yourself. But just for now, because I feel like I've been talking a while, give me a yes if this is resonating with you, or if you have any questions, post them in the comments. I'd really love to see where I can support you more deeply. And also know, what is exactly deal and deliver. So while you're typing your comments in, one of the conversation sort of templates that you can use and make your own is when there is something that you need to talk about that feels very vulnerable and raw, and you can feel your pulse kind of going up, is to really have a conversation with that part of you that feels afraid. Where do you feel it in your body? How old is it? These are some of the questions that we go through when we're doing the mindfulness change process, because they're so transformative. When we can hold the parts that are afraid as secure adults and nurture and grow and inspire those parts to be something greater than the belief system. So, I want you to know that when you speak like this from a place of that there's no right or wrong, and it's nothing to be concerned about. When's a good time for us to talk about this? I always find in deal and deliver is when you don't make it personal. No, never blame, never shame, never make anybody wrong. I mean, these are key foundational being parts that are moving for me all the time in right relationship. And let's face it, we're in relationship with everything, including our own inner saboteur thoughts. So one of the templates you could use is, when you are, I'll use an example. My husband reminds me a lot of my father, and I had a lot of paternal wounds that I needed to cleanse, clear, and purify, which I'm really happy that I did before my father passed. But I used to say to him, when you're screaming like a banshee at the top of your voice, and you're projecting all this vile and assumption that I'm like your business partner on me, I feel very anxious and concerned, because you remind me of my father and when he used to get verbally abusive with my mother. And I know that you don't mean to do this or harm me. And I wanted to feel good for both of us. So what I need is for you to walk away. And when you've calmed down and you're willing to have a two-way conversation where it's like, are you with me here? In a quiet way, no raised voices that get me into fight, flight, or response. This is going to provide me a whole lot of value. So in order for me to have that from you, what would you need to deliver that? This is the beauty and the alchemy of a deal and deliver. And your whole life, let's face it, your whole life is a deal and deliver. Doing and being as a contribution to another person is fine. But if you're actually expecting something to come back to you ever, it's a deal. And most people have no clue what they would really like, because they don't have any boundaries. They don't know who they are, because they're adopting and adapting to their environment from their pre-7-year-old to keep themselves safe. So, most people believe that if they're kind and nice too, and this comes pre-7-year-old from our child parts, that everybody's going to be kind and nice. And unfortunately, most of the time, thinking that do unto others as they will have do unto you doesn't work, because you're not willing to see what someone is going to deliver, not what they can deliver, but what they will deliver. So here's some questions, and don't worry to write these down, because if you PM me, as I said, I'll send you the PDF cheat sheet on how to start applying and practicing deal and deliver. And what better timing than now, when you're probably going to spend time with your family or friends tomorrow on Freedom Day, to set yourself free, than to start using some of these questions and creating a win-win. So the first thing I always ask is, what's the deal here? What do I want delivered? And then asking, so the discernment part is, can this person deliver? Will they deliver this? And what do you have to deliver to get what they want, to get what you want? Okay. And then you have to get really honest. So this is the deep down shadow part of exactly what this full moon in Scorpio is asking us to let go of, is getting very clear and in your truth. So trusting, what is it that you're unwilling to ask for? Okay, so we're back to boundaries and Boundary Bootcamp 101. So when you start with this way of functioning, you can be very exact. In fact, in all my conversations, when it's, this is life-changing, I always ask, exactly what would you like to see happen here? I put exact before my question. And it's not a conclusion with a question mark attached to. This is, which is very manipulative, right? This is a space of exploration where you're asking exactly what does this have to look like in order for you to do what I want. You can use this with car salesmen, plumbers, contractors, business colleagues, bosses, partners, children, because exact is a little bit like truth. When you ask truth 3 times, the law of 3 always applies. You're going to pick up the lie, or you're going to feel the energetics of the truth for that person. And then you get to decide how you want to choose to receive it, or say, actually, thanks, but this isn't going to work for me. What else is possible? So, always ask to be exact, especially around money. If you're asking exactly what it's going to look like, this is not the boomerang beyond moment when you commit to say yes to a quote to fix your toilet, and then there's additionals added on to the bill, right? When people do this, especially when they talk about money, is to talk around money. They're never clear about it. They talk around money. They talk around the exactness of what you're asking for, and they create a lot of confusion. This is what narcissists do really, really well, right? They confuse you. I've seen this happen so many times with money exchanges as well, that eventually you think you're going insane. You have no idea what they're going to do, or how much they're going to charge you, or what it's going to turn out like, or what's going to be delivered. But when you use the word exactly, the person has to commit to what they're saying, and they can't weasel out of it. So it's a brilliant way of getting what you want. And in any business or relationship, you have to get very clear about exactly what the deal is, right? This is part of boundary building, because people will do anything and everything they can to weasel out of it, right? This is the trying. This is the maybe. This is the non-committal. This is what we were talking about in codependent relationships, where you don't feel heard, but you don't ask for what you want because you're afraid. You have poor boundaries. And you're also trying to control your environment, which is impossible because you can't control what other people are doing. But something that I used to do a lot too, to look at, how can I create safety? How can I create security for me? And the codependent will always go into addictive coping patterns in order to try and control the outcome or the relationship. So you have to ask, exactly what is this going to look like? Exactly how is this going to work? Exactly what are you going to deliver? Exactly what is it going to cost? Exactly what do you expect from me? That's a key one. And exactly what do I have to do in order for you to do this for me, or for me to get this? So, remember, you are a trustworthy, kind, caring, compassionate person. And you don't tend to want to do this because you want the world to be based on trust. So you always get fucked over, clear and simple. So deal and deliver is what you have to function from. Never justify, never confront, and never seek approval. Okay, I said that earlier. So when I talk about never confronting, remember that when you're confronting, it's projection. You're trying to prove the rightness of your point of view, and you can't hear what the other person is willing to deliver. If you're validating, you're trying to get the person to agree with you. Okay, and this, if you haven't, go back and listen to the video I did on unhealthy triangulation. This is where you go via to get what you want. It's the gossip. It's the talking behind other people's backs in the hopes that other people will validate the rightness of your point of view. And never explain, because when you're trying to explain, this is why I have my mantra, nothing to prove, nothing to hide. It's so exhausting trying to explain and defend your point of view all the time. And when you're trying to explain, does it make sense that you're trying to get the other person to see what your point of view is? Not to just be aware of what their point of view is. It's insane. And nobody wins. And the other thing is never justify anything. When you're trying to justify, you're trying to make you right and the other person wrong. Don't bother. Just know you have nothing to hide and nothing to prove. And if you need to create something that's different, and you have to mean it, is I say, you know what, I am really confused here. Can you please help me? Because then the other person has to explain, validate, or justify what they're saying. And people will take care of you if you just ask them to help you. If the deal is not working, then you got to ask yourself, where do I need to tighten up or change my boundaries? Where do we need to change this, or do we need to end it? Okay, that saves you years of staying in unhealthy, abusive relationships. So I always say my deal with myself, that's the boundary, is that I'm going to have total consciousness no matter what it costs me. No matter who I lose, no matter what I have to do or who I have to do, I'm going to get totally conscious and honest with myself. That's my deal and deliver. And every day, if I'm being bluntly honest to myself, I know what my boundaries are. So I know what I have to do in order to get what I want. It's simple. So what can I do for you today? That's the deal and deliver type of question. And even if my peeps, even if you listening to this right now can't verbalize what you're listening to here, or what you're coming into this circle for, you'll get the energy of it if you just ask that question. So if you're not able to articulate it, you can keep asking questions, like, what is it that you don't want me to know? Or what is it that you don't want to tell me? Or what is it that you think I will be offended by? This is the vulnerability of braving the wilderness of, what is it called? Lost in translation, miscommunication. So you have to ask the questions to get an awareness, not an answer. There's a difference between delivering what is being asked for and knowing what you're offering. So be clear about what you're offering. You can't be wishy-washy. You have to be exact if you want to win-win. So if somebody will ask you for something, and if you never take the time to figure out what they're offering or what you're offering, you just try to deliver what they've asked for. They take you out of awareness and choice into the necessity of delivering because you've asked. That's where your boundaries go backwards. Your boundaries disappear. So I hope you're finding this fun. And my question to you is this, is if you were creating your life as a business, from how much consciousness can I curate here in this moment of showing up for you, instead of how much money am I going to make here? You can create a totally different universe. You know, I have so many ideas, and when you have an idea, ask yourself, is this for now or is it in the future? That's the flexibility of healthy boundaries, because then you can ask the idea or the person that's coming with a collaboration or something to tell me, and I ask my body this, tell me when it's time to institute you, beautiful creation, right? Because my body is the generative, creative, sexual energy that's wanting to thrive and wanting to deliver more and show up more generously. So before you actually take action on any new idea, you have to see it as its own entity, just as you would another person, and ask, what do I need to be aware of here? What do I need to educate myself about? Who are the people that I need that can help me in gaining momentum with this? Because I know, in all honesty, that I'm a generator. I'm very good at coming up with ideas. I'm great at leading the way, but I'm not so good at instituting. So when I ask those questions, the right person or thing comes to me because I'm asking. So what happens is you put all your attention and energy into this idea if you're not asking these questions, and then at some point it takes on a life force of its own. So it has to become itself, and it becomes something that can contribute and generate to your life, but it's not yours. Just like our animals, we have no ownership, we have stewardship. And this is right relationship that can make you a lot of money and bring you back to true belonging with yourself and the people that you care about. So, you have to be willing to look at, will it generate what you ask of it? But that's usually the point where you stop asking questions or you let your boundaries slip. I have to have a drink. I've been talking too much. So does it make sense that the idea that you can give something a life force of its own, and then it goes out into the world and it contributes and generates back to you, is something that's completely different to what's out there. Other people will tell you that the space you have run into is all the kinds of things and that you have somehow messed up, that you've made a mistake. Don't buy that lie. Okay? Because you're always starting something. That's why we are omnipresent. We're multifaceted, living human beings. And you're always in this generative state of death and rebirth. It's the cycle of life. It's the feeding cycle of Chinese medicine. And most people fail in their relationships, whether it's with a partner or their children or a business, because they start something and they put all their energy into it, which is always very intense. And they can feel the intensity building, and then it creates, as it starts coming into being reality in the physical form, and then right before it's about to show up, it changes from solidity to space. And I've actually become the space of being what that is, more than not. And that starts the impetus. It's over, right? And then we go, wow, it's not working. Instead of asking, where's it going? What am I not aware of? What do I need in order to have this come back to me a godzillion times over, a number so big only God knows? And then pulling our energy out, and then poof, it's gone, right? That's the same thing that happens with when you don't have strong boundaries. So some of you may have found that up until a point of this conversation or something else happening, that your entire life you've spent on start, because in start you have that constant state of intensity. It's the serotonin hit, it's the adrenaline rush, it feels good. But follow through is always based on the lightness of energy, which you tend to assume is no interest. Interesting, isn't it? You might want to go back and listen to this again. So, I have much more to share on this, and I feel like the alarm is going off in my neighbor's yard, and I kind of feel that it's time for me to end this little boundary boot camp where we can stop coping mechanisms and self-pleasing codependent addictions and start looking at, what energy, space, and consciousness can I be to create a reality way beyond my imagination, by starting with the foundation of trust and remembering who you are. Do what you do because it's fun. Don't do it because you have to. If you do your entire life from, just for me, just for fun, don't tell anyone, you will get everything that you desired. And when you get really good at this stuff, at creating healthy, flexible boundaries, at knowing your no, at calling the energy in that's there to support you, that's the alchemy of manifestation. That's the alchemy of abundance. That's the alchemy of the law of reciprocity and manifestation. And the magic you generate doesn't fit other people's reality. So they discount it, or they call in something else, or they wait for good luck or the right time. And that's why you don't tell anyone, because if you're generating and it doesn't fit the reality of what other people have decided is true, they will vilify and abuse you and use you as a doormat. This is the art of subtle manipulation, or that title of a book, the subtle art of not giving a fuck, right? Excuse my language, but it's just so relative to what we're talking about with boundaries and the deal and deliver. So, you are going to prove that their unhappiness is wrong when you're too happy. If you're too happy, you're either on a drug or you're insane in this reality. And we're here at this time to change this through trust, through love, through service, through giving generously, where it's a win-win for everyone. So, if you make your choices based on what works for you and you don't explain or justify or ask permission or tell anyone about what you're choosing, you're going to get everything that you want. And I hope that you take this as the nudge, if that's what you've been waiting for, to come along for the ride. My birthday month, I always offer a 28 days of love notes or something beautiful. And Spirit called last night and I did listen. And I'll be inviting you to join me for 28 days of rituality and red hot holy truth talks with our soul and our heart and our bodies, and where we're going to lean into desire, and we're going to bring in the medicine and oracle cards and journaling exercises. And I'm testing myself in my boundaries here too, because I know how important your time is. So it's going to be 28 days, 28 minutes a day, live like this, with little 28 days of rituality delivered to your inbox, little sound bites, meditations, activations, journeying work and journaling, self-inquiry, dancing with the shadows and all that good stuff. So I hope you join me. I've made it really, really a no-brainer to join. I'm only asking $128 for this because I want to give back to and Highfeld Horse Care are really needing our support right now with all the great work they're doing on the ground with abused donkeys and horses around the Johannesburg, Gauteng area. And I felt called to ask and honor my boundaries and know that I have something of value to offer that is worthy of that exchange. So if you're not on my email list, get on it, and I'll be letting you know what's entailed and how you can join me. And I hope that you do, because the world needs you more now than ever before. And I know that sounds so cliche, but the world needs more light workers like you, standing in the light with an open heart, rubbing salt on the wounds, and doing whatever it takes to just show up and serve in greater and more meaningful ways for the things that matter to us, like a sustainable planet that gets back to thriving, to a world of compassion and love. So I hope you join me. And if you have any questions about that, let me know and type it in the comments. Let me know if this was helpful. Thank you for being here. I see you. I honor you. I love you. And I can't wait to enter into this magical ether of Gemini, the air, the direction of vision of establishing new boundaries that are healthy and flexible and showing up in love, because that's what the world needs. To trust that we are love and to trust that we're enough in the love that we came in here to be. All right. Take care and happy Freedom Day. Bye.